The night was cold and the small farm lay silent under a pale moon. The fields stretched wide, but they were empty, waiting for the next season's crop. In the distance, the sound of crickets filled the air. Everything seemed peaceful. Yet, in the shadows, a pair of frightened eyes watched the barn. She was not human. Her skin was faintly blue, with lines that glowed softly in the dark, like fading embers of fire. Her clothes were torn, no more than rags clinging to her thin body. Hunger had weakened her legs, but the burning in her stomach was stronger than her fear. For days she had walked with no food, no shelter. Tonight, she could not take it anymore. The alien girl moved slowly, careful not to make a sound. She pushed, opened the barn door with shaking hands. Inside, the smell of grain and bread filled her senses. Her mouth watered, and her chest tightened with desperation. She spotted a small basket of bread left on a table. It was not much, but to her, it was life itself. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. She tore off a piece and stuffed it into her mouth. The taste brought tears to her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt the strength to breathe again, but before she could take another bite, a voice thundered behind her. "What do you think you're doing?" The girl froze. She turned, crumbs falling from her lips, and saw a tall human man standing in the doorway. His face was hard, his eyes sharp. He held a lantern in one hand, its golden light spilling across the barn. The shadows fled and there was nowhere to hide. Her knees gave out, and she fell to the floor. The piece of bread slipped from her fingers. Her voice cracked as she tried to speak. "Please, don't hurt me, I was only hungry." The man stepped closer, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. He looked down at her, his jaw tight with anger. Yet in the flicker of the lantern he could see her shaking, her bones pressing against her skin, her eyes wide with terror. She was no thief out of greed. She was a creature on the edge of death. "You dare steal from my farm," he said, his voice low. "Do you think I feed strangers?" Tears rolled down her cheeks. She pressed her forehead to the ground in shame. "I have nothing, no family, no home. If you throw me out, I will die. Please let me stay. I will work your fields by day and—" Her voice broke as she whispered, "Warm you by night if that is the price to live." The man's eyes widened. Her words shocked him. She was offering everything she had left, her dignity, her body, her life, only to survive. He set the lantern on the table and crouched in front of her. "Why would you say such a thing?" he asked, his tone softer now. She lifted her head, her face streaked with dirt and tears. "Because I have nothing else. You can take my life or you can use me. But please do not send me back to the cold." For a long moment, silence filled the barn. The man studied her, his heart heavy with conflict. She had broken into his home. She had stolen his food. Yet here she was, not running, not fighting, but begging like a child lost in the dark. Her body shook from weakness. Even as she tried to kneel, she nearly collapsed again. He could see her ribs through her thin skin, could hear her shallow breaths. "You would work in the fields?" he asked finally. She nodded quickly. "Yes. I can carry. I can dig. I can clean. Anything you ask I will do. I only need food and a place to sleep." The farmer stood pacing the barn. His mind was at war. If he let her stay, the neighbors would talk. Humans and aliens did not mix. She could be trouble. She could bring danger to his land. But if he threw her out, she would not last until morning. He looked back at her. This small, broken figure, kneeling in the straw, her glowing lines dim with exhaustion. She was more than a thief. She was a survivor, hanging by a thread. "Get up," he said at last. Her heart stopped. She thought he would drag her outside, but instead, he pulled the basket of bread closer to her. "Eat," he commanded. Her eyes widened, disbelief flooding her face. Slowly, she reached for the bread, her hands trembling harder than before. She took a bite, then another, chewing quickly as though afraid it would be taken away. The farmer watched her in silence. He still did not trust her. He still did not understand why fate had brought her here. But something deep in his chest stirred, a flicker of compassion he thought he had lost long ago. As she ate, she looked up at him, her voice faint. "Thank you, human." The man turned away, hiding the storm of emotions in his eyes. He had not yet decided what to do with her, but one thing was clear. This night was only the beginning, and the choice he made would change both their lives, forever. The barn was quiet again, only the sound of her chewing breaking the silence. The human farmer stood near the door, his arms crossed, his eyes never leaving her. He had allowed her to eat, but that did not mean he trusted her. She was still a stranger, a thief, and an alien. Yet something about her trembling body and broken voice pulled at him in a way he did not expect. When the bread was finished, she sat back on her heels. Her face glowed faintly in the lantern light, the strange patterns on her skin pulsing like dim stars. Her stomach was no longer in pain, but her fear had not gone. She knew he could still cast her out, and the cold night would finish what hunger had started. She bowed her head. "Thank you," she whispered again. "But I know food alone cannot pay for what I have done. Please let me earn my place here. I can work in your fields, I can clean your home, I can serve you in any way you ask." The farmer's jaw tightened. He had heard desperate people before, but this was different. There was no trick in her voice, no plan to escape after she had filled her stomach. She was offering herself completely, body and soul, because she believed it was her only chance to live. "You already stole from me," he said slowly. "Why should I believe you now?" Her eyes lifted, and for a moment, he saw the fire of determination within them. "Because I have nothing left to lose. If I betray you, you can end me. If I fail you, you can throw me away. But if you give me a chance, I will not stop until I have proved I am worth the bread you gave." The farmer turned away, his boots creaking on the wooden floor. He did not like her words. They were too raw, too real. A human could lie, but this girl's voice carried pain that no lie could copy. He set the lantern higher on a hook, the golden light spilling across the barn walls. "You would work my fields?" he asked. "Yes," she said at once. "From dawn until night. My body is weak now, but it will grow strong with food. I will not complain. I will not rest, unless you command it." "You would clean my home?" "Yes. I can cook, I can mend, I can do all the tasks of a servant, and you would—" His words stopped, heavy on his tongue. He did not want to say it, but her earlier promise echoed in his mind. She lowered her eyes. "If you demand it, yes. By night I will keep you warm, not because I wish it, but because it is the only thing I have to offer beyond labor." The farmer's chest tightened. He hated her words, yet he understood them. She was ready to trade, even her dignity, just to breathe another day. He took a deep breath and stepped closer. "What is your name?" he asked. Her lips parted. For a moment she seemed afraid to speak it. Finally she whispered, "Lyra." The name hung in the air. The farmer nodded slowly. "Lyra, if you are to stay, you will work. That is the only reason I allow strangers on my land. But hear me well. I do not need warmth from you at night. I need honesty and labor, do you understand?" Lyra's eyes widened, surprise flashing across her tired face. She expected him to demand her body first, but instead, he dismissed the offer like smoke in the wind. She nodded quickly. "Yes, I understand. I will not fail you." He studied her carefully. "If you lie, if you steal again, you will not get a second chance. Do you still wish to stay?" Her voice shook, but it was steady enough. "Yes, I wish to stay." The farmer turned, pulling a blanket from a nearby shelf. He tossed it to her. "Sleep here tonight. Tomorrow you begin your work." Lyra clutched the blanket as though it was gold. Her body sank into the straw, the warmth wrapping her thin frame. For the first time in many nights, she felt safe enough to close her eyes. Yet in her heart, fear still lingered. The farmer's mercy was not the end of her struggle, it was only the beginning. The man blew out the lantern, leaving the barn in darkness. He stepped outside, the door closing behind him. As he walked back to his house, his thoughts were heavy. He had taken in a stranger, a thief, and an alien. It was madness, yet something inside told him this decision would change everything. Back, in the barn, Lyra whispered into the straw, a vow no one else could hear. I will not waste this chance. I will prove myself, even if it breaks me. The night carried her words away, and the stars shone faintly above, watching the start of a bond neither human nor alien could yet understand. The morning sun rose over the farm, spilling light across the quiet fields. Dew sparkled on the grass, and the air was cool with the scent of soil. The farmer stepped outside his house, pulling on his worn jacket. He was ready to see if the alien, girl's promise meant anything. Lyra was already awake. She stood near the barn door, clutching the blanket he had given her. Her face looked tired, but her glowing lines were a little brighter after food and rest. She bowed her head when he approached, her voice soft. I am ready. The farmer handed her a wooden hoe. If you wish to stay, you will work the land. No excuses. She nodded, gripping the tool with shaky hands. The fields stretched before her, endless rows waiting to be turned. She had never used human tools before. Her people had once lived in villages, but that was long gone. Still, she lifted the hoe and began to strike the soil. The first swing nearly broke her balance. Her arms shook and the wooden handle slipped from her palms. The farmer watched, unimpressed. If you cannot do it, you will not last here. Lyra bent down, picked up the hoe again and tried once more. Her thin muscles strained, her back ached, but she refused to stop. Every strike of the tool was weak, yet filled with determination. Sweat rolled down her face and dirt clung to her hands. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, and the heat pressed down on them. The farmer worked his own row nearby, his strong arms moving with rhythm and ease. He glanced at her from time to time, expecting her to collapse, but she kept going. Her pace was slow, her body trembling, but she did not drop the tool again. At midday, he called for a rest. She fell to her knees in the soil, panting heavily. Her chest heaved with each breath, and her glowing lines flickered weakly. The farmer tossed her a flask of water. She caught it with both hands and drank quickly, as though every drop was life itself. You are no farmer, he said flatly. This work will break you. Lyra wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Her voice was hoarse but firm. Then let it break me. Better to fall in the field than in the streets. I promised you, and I will not stop. The farmer stared at her for a long moment. He expected begging or excuses, but instead she gave him defiance, not against him, but against her own weakness. Something inside him shifted. By evening, her hands were raw with blisters, her body nearly too weak to stand. Yet when he told her to stop, she shook her head. One more row, she insisted. The farmer finally took the hoe from her trembling hands. Enough. You will collapse. Lyra swayed on her feet, then fell to the ground. She lay on the soil, breathing hard, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. He sighed and lifted her into his arms. She was light, far too light, as if her body was made of fragile sticks. He carried her back to the barn and set her on the straw. You are stubborn, he muttered. Her lips curled into the faintest smile. That is how I am still alive. That night, while the farmer sat alone at his table, he thought of her words. She had no strength, no skill, yet she had spirit. He had seen many workers give up after a few hours of hard labor, but this alien girl, weak as she was, refused to surrender. The next morning, she returned to the fields again. Her blisters were worse, her arms stiff, but she picked up the hoe without hesitation. Day after day, she struggled, her body failing but her will unbroken. Slowly, painfully, she began to adapt. Her swings grew steadier, her rows less crooked. The farmer could no longer deny it. She was changing. Yet outside the farm, whispers began. The neighbors had noticed the alien girl working in the fields. They saw her glowing skin under the sun, Her fragile frame bent over the soil. They wondered why the farmer, known for his pride and independence, would keep such a creature on his land. Some called it foolishness. Others called it dangerous. One evening, as the farmer walked into the town for supplies, a man approached him. "I saw her," the man said. "That alien girl on your farm. What are you doing keeping her there? You know trouble follows their kind." The farmer's eyes narrowed. "She works for her food, that is all." The man shook his head. "Be careful, people are talking. If word spreads too far, you may find yourself in danger." The farmer returned home with heavy thoughts. He found Lyra sitting near the barn, mending a torn cloth with clumsy stitches. She looked up at him with tired eyes, her hands still sore from the fields. He said nothing, but deep inside he knew the truth. Taking her in had already changed his life, but it had also painted a target on his back. The neighbors' whispers were only the beginning. As the stars rose that night, Lyra lay awake on the straw, her vow still burning in her heart. She had survived hunger. She had survived the fields. But now another battle was coming, one she could not fight alone. The days passed slowly on the farm. Each sunrise brought more work, and each sunset left Lyra's body aching. Still, she rose with the dawn, her thin frame bent under the weight of tools, her hands rough with blisters. She was learning, step by step, how to use the earth as humans did. The farmer said little, but he noticed her rows were straighter now, her grip on the hoe stronger. She was no longer the weak thief who stumbled into his barn, but with every moment of progress, shadows still lingered behind her eyes. At night, when the barn was quiet, the farmer sometimes heard her whisper in her sleep, broken words filled with fear. Sometimes she cried softly, clutching the blanket as though it were the last piece of safety she had. He pretended not to notice, but the sound stayed with him long after it faded. One evening, after a long day of work, the farmer brought her a small meal. He placed it on the table in the barn. "Eat," he said, then turned to leave. Her voice stopped him. "Why are you kind to me?" He faced her, his eyes hard. "Kind. I put you in the fields. I make you work until you fall. That is not kindness. You gave me food when you did not have to. You gave me a blanket when you could have left me in the cold. That is kindness to someone like me." The farmer said nothing, but his silence gave her courage. For the first time, she began to tell her story. "My people had villages," she whispered, her glowing lines dim. "We lived near the river, where the water was clear and the trees grew tall. I had a family once, a mother, a younger brother, neighbors who cared for us, but that is gone now." She looked down at her hands, her voice shaking. "Soldiers came, they burned the houses, they took the food. They said our kind had no right to live near the human settlements. Anyone who resisted was killed. I ran with my brother, but we were chased. He fell behind. I never saw him again." Farmer's chest tightened. He had seen conflict before, had heard stories of villages torn apart, but hearing it from her lips was different. "I walked for days," she continued. "No water, no food, only fear. I begged in towns, but they pushed me away. To them I was filth. To them I was nothing. When I stole from your barn, I thought it would be the end. Either you would kill me or hunger would." Her voice broke, and tears fell onto the rough wooden table. She wiped them quickly, ashamed. "I am sorry. I should not speak of this. You did not ask." The farmer stood in silence. He was not a man of gentle words, but he could not walk away. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "You survived," he said simply. Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide. "Yes, but survival has cost me everything, even my dignity." The farmer's gaze hardened, remembering the desperate offer she had made on the first night. He shook his head. "You do not owe me that. Your labor is enough. Keep the rest of yourself." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The lantern flickered, casting long shadows across the barn walls. At last, Lyra whispered, "Why do you care what happens to me? You could have thrown me out, you could have left me to die like the others did." The farmer leaned back, his face unreadable. Maybe I am tired of watching death. Maybe I want to see someone fight to live. Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time since she had come, she felt something different from fear. She felt seen. Yet outside the farm, the whispers of neighbors grew louder. In the market, two men spoke behind the farmer's back. He keeps her on his land, an alien girl. Do you not see the danger? They will come looking for her. And when they do, he will bring trouble on all of us. That night, as the farmer walked home, he saw two strangers watching from the edge of his property. Their eyes followed him, their stance sharp and cold. He knew then that danger was not far. When he returned to the barn, Lyra was awake, sitting in the straw with her knees pulled to her chest. Her glowing lines were dimmer than ever, her face pale with exhaustion. She looked up as he entered. Something is coming, isn't it? He did not answer. Instead, he pulled the lantern closer and set it beside her. Rest. Tomorrow will be harder. She wanted to ask more, but the weight of fear pressed her lips closed. She lay down, curling under the blanket. The farmer stood by the door, watching the dark horizon. He knew she carried shadows of the past, but now he realized those shadows were not finished with her. The farm was no longer just his. It had become a refuge for a hunted soul, and that meant it was now marked by danger. And as the wind howled across the fields, the farmer wondered if mercy had cost him more than he was ready to pay. The morning sun rose heavy and red, as if warning of trouble. The farmer moved through the fields with slow steps, his eyes scanning the horizon more than the soil. Lyra worked beside him, her hands steady on the hoe, though her glowing lines flickered faintly with unease. She could feel it too. The air carried tension as though the land itself held its breath. By midday, the first signs of danger arrived. A cart rolled down the dirt road drawn by tired horses. On it sat two men, their clothes neat, their eyes sharp. They did not look like farmers. They carried papers, weapons, and authority. When they stopped at the edge of the farmer's grip tightened on his tools. "Afternoon," one of them called. His voice was polite, but his smile was thin. "We are looking for a runaway. A girl, not human. Blue skin, glowing marks. Have you seen anyone like that?" Lyra froze. Her hands clenched the hoe so tightly her knuckles turned white. The farmer glanced at her, his face unreadable. He wiped sweat from his brow and walked toward the men. "I have not seen anyone like that," he said firmly. The men exchanged a look. One climbed down from the cart, his boots crunching in the dirt. He walked past the farmer, his eyes scanning the fields, the barn, the house. "Funny," he said slowly. "We heard whispers in the market. They say you have taken in a girl, a thief, a beggar, maybe even worse." The farmer's jaw tightened. "The market talks too much." The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, we are not here to make trouble for you. If she is here, hand her over. No questions asked. If not, we will search the farm to be sure. Which will it be?" Behind them, Lyra stood frozen, in the soil. Her breath came quick, her glowing lines pulsing brighter with fear. The farmer saw her out of the corner of his eye. One wrong move, and she would be discovered. He stepped in front of the stranger, blocking his view. "This is private land. You have no right to search it." The man's smile faded. His hand rested on the hilt of his weapon. "Are you refusing an order?" The farmer's voice was like stone. "I am refusing strangers walking into my home without proof." For a moment, silence stretched. The second man on the cart leaned forward, watching carefully. Lyra could feel her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She wanted to run, to hide, but her legs would not move. Finally, the first man stepped back. "Very well, but remember this. Protecting her will not end well for you. She is not your problem. She is a danger. If we find out you lied, there will be consequences." They climbed back onto the cart, the horses pulling them away. Dust rose behind them as they disappeared down the road. The farmer stood in the dirt, his fists clenched, his eyes burning with anger. He turned to Lyra. She was trembling, her face pale, her body weak. "They are looking for me," she whispered. "Yes," he said. His voice was low, controlled. "And they will come again." That night the farm was quiet, but the quiet was heavy with fear. The farmer sat at his table, sharpening his tools, though his mind was elsewhere. Lyra sat in the barn, staring at the lantern light. She thought of the men, their sharp eyes, their confident words. She had seen their kind before. They would not stop until they found her. When the farmer entered the barn later, she looked up quickly. "You should not protect me. They will punish you. They may burn your land. You could lose everything." He leaned against the doorway, his face hard. "You think I do not know that? But I will not hand you over." Her voice cracked. "Why? I am not worth it. I am no one." He stepped closer, his shadow falling across her. "Because I will not see you dragged away like an animal. You work, you fight to live. That makes you worth more than those men." Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head. "They will come with more men next time. They will not ask. They will take." The farmer's eyes narrowed. "Then let them try." The words hung heavy in the air. Lyra stared at him, half afraid, half in awe. She had never seen a human stand for her, never heard such defiance spoken on her behalf. That night sleep did not come easily. The wind rattled the barn doors, and every sound felt like approaching boots. Lyra curled under her blanket, whispering to herself that she must be strong. The farmer sat by his window watching the dark road, his hand resting on the rifle across his lap. The threat had returned, and it would not leave quietly. Both of them knew the peace of the farm was ending. What neither of them knew was how much they would have to sacrifice to hold it. The following days passed with heavy silence. The farm still looked the same under the morning sun, but the air was not the same anymore. Every rustle in the trees, every creak of the barn felt like a warning. Lyra worked harder than ever, her hands rough, her glowing lines dim from exhaustion. Yet even as she dug into the soil, her eyes kept drifting toward the road. She expected them to return. The farmer also felt the weight of what was coming. He carried his rifle everywhere, even when moving between the house and the fields, at tour night. He checked the locks twice. He was not a man who feared easily, but he had lived long enough to know the kind of men who had visited. They would not give up. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the hills, the sound of hooves broke the silence. Lyra froze where she stood, the hoe slipping from her hands. The farmer lifted his head, his grip tightening on the rifle. The dust on the road rose before the horses even appeared. This time, there were more of them. 4 men, armed and sharp-eyed, riding hard until they reached the farm gate. They did not smile, they did not greet. They dismounted with purpose, boots striking the dirt with a heavy sound. The leader stepped forward, the same man who had spoken before. His voice was colder. "Now, we gave you a chance, you lied to us. Hand her over, or your land will burn tonight." The farmer's jaw tightened. "There is no one here for you." The man's eyes narrowed. He raised a hand, and 2 of his men began walking toward the barn. Lyra's heart pounded. She stood, just inside the barn door, her glowing lines flaring with fear. She wanted to run, but her legs were locked in place. The farmer raised his rifle. "Take one more step and you will not take another." The men stopped. The leader laughed softly. "You would fight us for her? A thief? A beggar? An alien? Do you know what she is worth? Nothing. Yet you risk your life for her?" The farmer's voice was firm, steady as stone. "She works my land. She earns her place. That makes her worth more than men who hunt the weak." For a moment, the world seemed to hold still. Then, with a shout, one of the men rushed forward. The farmer fired. The blast echoed across the fields, and the man fell. Chaos erupted. The other men drew their weapons. The farmer fired again, forcing them to scatter behind the cart. Bullets struck the wooden posts, sending splinters flying. Inside the barn, Lyra crouched low, fear twisting inside her. But then she saw the farmer, standing alone in the open, outnumbered, protecting her with no shield but his own body. Something burned inside her chest. She could not stay hidden while he risked everything. She grabbed a pitchfork and stepped out into the yard. Her hands shook, but she lifted the tool like a spear. One of the attackers turned toward her, laughing at the sight of a thin alien girl holding farm tools. But when he lunged, she thrust the pitchfork forward with all her strength. The sharp prongs caught his arm and he cried out, stumbling back. The farmer glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face, but there was no time for words. The fight raged on, smoke and dust filling the yard. The leader shouted, "Enough of this. Burn it down." One man grabbed a torch from the cart and lit it. Flames roared as he flung it toward the barn. Lyra's eyes widened. She ran, throwing herself onto the straw before it caught. With her bare hands, she smothered the fire, coughing as smoke rose around her. The farmer's voice thundered, "You will not touch my land." He fired again, his shots precise, forcing the attackers back. Two of them dragged the wounded man onto a horse. The leader glared, his face twisted with rage. "This is not over," he spat. "You cannot protect her forever." With that, they mounted their horses and retreated, disappearing down the road, their threats hanging in the air like poison. The yard was quiet again, broken only by the sound of the farmer's heavy breathing. Lyra stood near the barn, her hands blackened with soot, her chest rising and falling rapidly. He lowered his rifle and walked toward her. For a moment they only looked at each other, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on them both. "You should have stayed hidden," he said at last. She shook her head, her voice trembling but strong. "I could not. You risked everything for me. I had to stand with you." The farmer studied her, and for the first time since she had come, his stern face softened. "You are stubborn," he said. A faint smile touched her lips. "That is how I am still alive." The farmer glanced at the smoke rising from the barn, then at the road where the men had vanished. He knew they would come back. They would not forget the fight. But now, as he looked at the alien girl standing beside him, clutching a blackened pitchfork with blistered hands, he realized something had changed. She was no longer just a thief, no longer just a burden. She was part of the farm now, and he would not stand alone again. Together they had faced the storm. But the true battle had only begun. The night after the attack was long and restless. The barn still smelled of smoke, and the soil carried dark stains from the fight. The farmer sat awake by the window of his house, his rifle across his lap, his eyes scanning the empty road. Every sound in the wind felt like a warning. Every shadow across the fields felt like a threat. In the barn, Lyra could not sleep either. Her hands were raw from smothering the flames, her arms sore from holding the pitchfork. Yet her heart burned with something new. For the first time in years, she was not running alone. For the first time, someone had chosen to stand between her and death. When dawn finally broke, the sun rising gold over the fields, the farm looked calm again. The farmer stepped outside, his face lined with weariness, but his back still straight. Lyra followed him, her glowing marks brighter under the sunlight, though her body trembled from exhaustion. She stopped beside him, her voice soft. "They will come again." He nodded. "Yes. They will not forgive what happened here." "Then why do you still keep me?" she asked. "I bring danger to your land. I bring fire to your door. Any other man would have thrown me away." Farmer turned to her, his eyes steady. "Because you are no longer just a stranger. You are part of this place now. You fight for it. You fight with me. That makes you worth keeping." Lyra lowered her head, her throat tight with emotion. She had begged for scraps in towns before. She had been treated like dirt, like a burden, like something less than alive. But here, for the first time, she was told she was worth something. Her tears fell silently, not from fear, but from relief. Together, they walked into the fields, The soil was scarred from battle, but the seeds still waited to be planted. The farmer handed her a small bag of seed, and she looked down at it as if it were treasure. "This is the future," he said simply. "If you want to stay, you plant it with me." She knelt in the soil, pressing the seeds gently into the earth. Her glowing lines shimmered faintly as she worked, her hands steady despite their blisters. The farmer worked beside her, his strong arms moving with practiced rhythm. Two figures, one human, one alien, kneeling side by side, turning broken ground into hope. Days passed, then weeks. The neighbors still whispered, but the farmer no longer cared. Those who dared to confront him left quickly when they saw the steel in his eyes. And word of the attack spread. Men who hunted the weak had been driven back by a farmer and a girl with nothing but courage. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Lyra sat outside the barn, watching the light fade. The farmer joined, her carrying a small loaf of bread. He tore it in half and handed her a piece. "You have worked hard," he said. She smiled faintly. "I am stronger now. The fields no longer break me." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You kept your promise." Her smile grew. "And you kept yours. You gave me a chance. You gave me a life." For a long time they sat in silence, watching the stars appear. The world beyond the farm was still dangerous. The men who had come for her were still out there. But here, on this patch of soil, there was something stronger than fear. There was trust. Lyra looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was nothing. I thought I would die forgotten. But you showed me I can belong. You showed me what it means to live." The farmer's eyes softened. He did not speak much, but his silence was not empty. It was full of unspoken promise, of loyalty, of quiet strength. As the night deepened, Lyra lay down in the barn, her heart finally at peace. For the first time since her village burned, she dreamed not of loss, but of tomorrow. And when the new day came, she rose with the dawn, her glowing lines shining brighter, her spirit no longer broken. The farmer was already in the fields, and she joined him without hesitation. Together, they worked the soil, planting seeds for a future neither had imagined before. They were not family by blood, nor bound by law. But in struggle and in sacrifice, they had forged something stronger, a bond born from mercy, tested by fire and sealed by loyalty. The world might come for them again, the road might bring danger once more. But no matter what storm rose, they would face it side by side. For in the heart of one human and the courage of one alien girl, a new dawn had begun.